Welcome back to the Intelligent Human Leadership Podcast. I am so grateful for you here once again as we dive into the topic of celebration. Now, for those of you watching the podcast here on YouTube, I'm wearing my red shirt here. It is getting toward the holidays. We have Thanksgiving coming up next week, and then of course we'll be into Christmas and New Year's and all those things. And that's what we often think about when we're talking about celebration. We might be thinking about a birthday, um, but what I want to talk about today on the podcast is one challenge I find in the business space. In Are we effectively communicating and celebrating in our business with our teams? How are we celebrating our success? And I want to challenge you to consider today on the podcast, are you looking at that as a key form of communication? It is communication. And in fact, there's a whole book written on it here. You guys can follow along called The Communication Code. I've talked about this in previous episodes. And if you're interested and you want to do more, there's actually a free assessment I offer that you can go on and kind of see how do you show up and communicate. And and for me, I've found that actually celebration is one of the weaker areas. There's a framework of in this communication code of celebration, care, clarity, collaborating, and critique. And we're going to start today just digging into celebration because celebration is really high support. You might have heard me talk about this in past episodes. High support and high challenge both create liberating leaders. It gets us in the space where we're in a healthy place of not just one or the other, but we need both. And so when we look at celebration, some people are all for it, other people are resistant to it. And so we're going to dive into that today on this episode because what I want to do is you hear me come back week after week is help you not just take in more information, but I want to help you become transformed in how you're using this information. How is it helping you become that most intelligent leader? Be the healthiest person in the room so that you're not missing out on celebrating and you're not missing out on the impact that it can have on those around you, your teammates, the organization as a whole. And so we want to be intentional in how we acknowledge achievements, progress, whether big or small, that we foster positivity and connection within your teams. This is super valuable. And I'm going to give you examples where it's worked and where it hasn't worked in today's podcast, um, and what you can start to do to lead more effectively. Now, you again, there's some barriers here because sometimes I think people don't think that communication is that important. And what I'm hope you're going to hear out of this podcast is that it is actually very important. And it's important for showing care for our teammates, for our family. And if we're not doing this, we're missing out. And we need to encourage one another because we're in a place and we just came out of elections, whether your candidate won or lost, there's people that are facing depression, there's people that are facing doubt, there's people that are worried, concerned. And so if you want to elicit more engagement, them listening and really producing more, because we're all going to produce more, we're going to be more effective when we're fully engaged. Celebrate the wins. I'll give you an example this week. I had an all hands meeting with a client last week where they're having challenges with people doing basic things, timesheets, some expenses things. And I've seen this time and time again, but we had to take time out. And this was more about, I would say, creating clarity in our last conversation with these folks. But here's the things that need to happen. And one of the things I had a conversation with one of the managers this week was, I asked her, how did things go with the team? Did they respond to this, direction and the need that the company has to make sure that timesheets are done, availability is provided? And she said, yeah, actually, I didn't have any issues come up. And I said, well, that's fantastic. Celebrate it. Make sure your team knows that you appreciate their hard work, their focus, their responsiveness. Don't let that go. That's a missed opportunity. That's a very small one that I'm giving you here on the podcast, but it's a big one in that it can make a lasting impact, a ripple, if you will. Think about throwing a rock in a pond and that ripple effect, right? And so we want to have that ripple effect in a good way. So there's lots of ways. I'm going to give you some examples here that you can do this, and you need to figure out what works best for you. Um, Celebrations, though, I want to don't need to be long and drawn out. And there's some ways that we can get into some more detailed ones here, but there's simple ways like at a team meeting where we can be very intentional at the beginning of the meeting, celebrating people. We could do it in newsletters or emails or a social media post. And again, the best is just a one-on-one. Hey, I appreciated you. I recognize the hard work that you did. And it could be that simple. It could be a little note. It does not have to be a big thing. And sometimes I think that's what people are like, well, we can't celebrate this. It takes too long. It does not need to take that long. Showing gratitude and appreciation and really celebrating one another does not have to be a long drawn out one. Now, there are challenges here because we don't want to be appearing insincere or superficial. We do want to come genuinely from a place of celebrating. And so if it's not genuine, I want to caution you in just kind of doing it rote, just out of habit, ritualistic, if you will. Those can lose their meaning and appreciation. It doesn't mean you can't bring life back into it and inject it. We had once a month we would have a a shared birthday party thing at the office where we would do that, and I thought it was enjoyable and good, but it could lose its saltiness, if you will, in a good way, meaning the attractiveness, what draws people into it. Um, and so sometimes we, as leaders, may only be looking at those big wins and think, well, that's what we got to celebrate. We don't want to celebrate these things because that's going to be maybe um, they're not going to be driven enough. And I think I want to encourage you that that's really usually not the case. People strive for further positive reinforcement. So it's not like, oh, if I give them this, then they won't continue to work or whatnot. I think that's unfortunately a negative way of doing things. And that might be your natural voice order where you might be a more high challenge. And so I want you to be aware of that. If you're a high challenge person, that's typically a pioneer or a guardian, if you guys know the five voices. But if you don't, if you're not, you guys can jump on my website, throughyourbusiness.com/five voices, check the free assessment and find out what is your natural voice. But and some of you may just struggle with honestly receiving praise. Number one, it's oftentimes we feel we're not worthy of it, or we don't want to draw attention to ourselves, and so because we feel that way, we might also have difficulty truly expressing celebration of others because we don't feel comfortable with it. And so, why is this essential in business? I've alluded to it earlier, and some of this is, you should hopefully light bulbs uh, affirmations come to mind here, but it improves team morale and cohesion. And today, more than ever, especially when we have a distributed workforce, people working remotely in different places, people can be very, very disconnected, feeling isolated, alone, and they don't know if anybody sees them. And I think it's really important that we see people for who they are, celebrate them, and find ways. We can find anybody almost, I believe, you can find something to celebrate. And starting with positivity, starting with um, support. And I'm not talking about being insincere here. I'm talking from a sincere, thoughtful approach, recognizing your team. It boosts productivity, like I mentioned earlier. And with that engagement, you're going to see, you know, dividends. I almost guarantee you're going to see dividends in employee retention and just their overall engagement, effectiveness, and the role that they're working on. It reinforces, like I said earlier in that story about um, people getting timesheets in on time. It reinforces desired behaviors and values within the company. You need to be intentional about reinforcing those because you want to emphasize those, and the things that are not positive and helpful, we want to minimize our focus on those things. We have to bring them up sometimes, but we don't want to have to keep focusing on that because that becomes a focus of like driving in the road and hitting that road rut. We don't want to be looking at the road rut and the challenges. We want to look at the clear path of what the better path going forward. Now, we all live in a fast-paced world, right? Business environments are going, 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 and sometimes we may feel like it's we're too busy to pause and celebrate. And for those of you that have done endurance sports, you recognize that there's spaces where you have to take rest. If you don't do that, you won't make it to the end of the race. And so it's counterintuitive sometimes. We're like, I just got to keep going. I just got to keep going. But there's a diminishing returns. And for those of you that love video games, there's these video games, right, where you're battling somebody. If you keep battling them, and if you don't re-energize yourself, you're not going to be able to win the game. So I'm about you winning the game, having a winning culture, and so don't fall into the trap of this pressure to just keep moving on so quickly. Celebrate your wins. Don't overlook them. Don't overstep them because you're going to miss out on, again, this recharge that you're getting. I come from a biology background. Some of you guys know, working in the environmental consulting world for years. We talk about recharge basins, if you will. Water comes in, and if we continue to drain the water out, it doesn't fill the water table back up. And there's a balance there of letting things out and storing it back up. So I want you to be mindful of this. And a related book and resource that I've talked about in the last podcast was the 5 gears framework. I talked about that in my mission trip down to Mexico. And one of the gears is social. One of the gears is, deep one-on-one connection and recharge. Now, celebration can come in different areas here, but I want you to be intentional of like, am I shifting into the gear of celebration? Could be just having a social get together. It could be just recognizing a person on a deeper level, or it could be just going through and recharging together, having just some fun um, together, or and so I want to encourage you to look at this and be aware that you might be missing out, moving too quickly, and are you giving yourself time to celebrate? And don't I want you to, there's some tactics and things here we can do to help minimize like getting the work done. Okay. We can do we can do celebrations out of work hours. It's not required necessarily. You can invite people, but it's an opportunity. We don't, again, I mentioned earlier, we can keep the celebrations brief. They don't have to go a long way. We can plan them in advance, and just keep them low key. Like I said, so it could be as simple as, hey, once a month we're going to have a dessert, a birthday cake, or fruit. For those of you that are trying to be healthier, we're going to have an opportunity to come together for 15 minutes in the break room. We want to recognize people. And again, if you're not in the office, maybe you send out a gift certificate to your team and you say, hey, go do that. Take the pictures with your other team members. Get out there, be intentional. And so um, when we do this purposefully, it creates meaning, and we are human beings of experience, feelings, emotions, right? And when we have really positive experiences, those it's a wiring of our brain, if you will, in a good things. We remember both very, very positive experiences and very, very negative ones. It's the way our brains work. Um, so as you reflect, you can most oftentimes go to the negative ones quicker. At least that's my experience. But you could also remember just very amazing memories. Oftentimes, as children, we think of positive experiences as celebrating a birthday, graduation, and those are beautiful things. They're momentous milestones. We don't have to have we don't have to just wait for those though. And it's like a drip, if you will. If you keep the drip going in a good way, um, you're not letting the relationship run dry. The organization run dry. We're keeping that fluidity. that relational oil, if you will, connectivity within our team. And so if we don't foster this, what's some of the one of the challenges we may be facing is really the burnout and the disconnection. And even though we live in a world of quote unquote connection digitally and whatnot, we're more disconnected, I believe, now than we have ever been, unfortunately, from human being to human being. And so if we're not recognizing that, we may have the unintended consequence of undervaluing contributions from our team members. And I don't think any one of us wants to diminish another person. We don't want to make light of another person because we all have value. I believe that fundamentally we each have value. We all have unique gifts and abilities, and we want to recognize that. And the more we can say, you know what, that is fantastic. You have contributed this way to the organization, and I'm so grateful for you and that you did that. Um, there's ways that you can do this, and I've talked about this on the Business Roundtable podcast too. We had a brainstorming session about how do we recognize uh, team members for what they do, and it doesn't mean you have to buy them an elaborate gift. Again, there's different ways we can do that, but I want you to be aware of the fact is how often are you doing this, um, and ask some questions about who needs to be there, what are we celebrating, where do we want to have this happen, why does it matter, why are we celebrating? These are great questions that we can look at, and we can plan those things monthly, possibly, uh, quarterly, annually. We can set up sometimes, and when we do those intentionally, it's like, oh, that's right, we're going to do that. We want to create that event or an experience. Um, and you could tie it into other events. I just talked with a friend and colleague last week where his company did a Monte Carlo night, and it was a charity event, and they participated, and they invited their team members to come out and have a great social time and just to appreciate them and say, hey, you know what, um, there is food and drink provided, and we just want you to have a great time. We appreciate you, and this is a fun event. It's for charity too, so it's a double win, where we get to celebrate our team, hang out together, and we contribute to charity. So you can look for opportunities like that. And if you struggle with that, that's where somebody like myself can come in as a coach, a consultant. For those of you who may not know, I was a DJ for a long time. I've done a lot of events, facilitated events. Bringing people together is what I do. So it really is that's my filter, and it made perfect sense when I was a DJ for a long time. I would bring people together to have an amazing experience, and so I can help you with that too, as far as company culture in the steward your business space. But all that to be said is we want to encourage you as a leader to, challenge some of the maybe norms that have been there that aren't helping you in your organization, and say, you know what, we want to be a little different. We want to make sure that our team feels an emotional connection. They feel supported. Um, and we're not just kind of waiting till things get to the wheels fall off, if you will, of the organization to try and pull this together. These are the types of maintenance that will provide lasting results for your organization, keeping people engaged, loyal, staying with you for years and years. Um, and so if you haven't got the book, The Communication Code, um, I offer that as part of my coaching program, including that. You can, of course, go find it on your favorite bookseller. But if it's one of the things I actually go through in a deeper dive across all of those areas, not just celebration, but if we can be intentional about creating a cadence, if you will, a frequency, a regularity to our moments of recognition, you're going to see positive dividends, um, as you lead yourself and your teams. And I want you to start with yourself. What are you celebrating? What it motivates you? Because that's a huge thing too. About when we're looking to achieve goals, when we're going somewhere, think about what do you want to celebrate when you get there. That's going to help you keep going in the times of it's tough and a struggle. It's like when I go there, this is what I want to be able to celebrate. When we hit this milestone, when we reach these number of sales or these number of clients we've been able to serve, right? We want to be able to celebrate that. Um, think about that. Be intentional about that. Align your celebrations with your team values and goals for authentic living. And look at those milestones that you've achieved. Uh, Here I am on the podcast every week coming and giving you these thoughts and action items. And I'd love to hear your comments and feedback about where a success worked for you in these celebrations and these ideas, and where maybe you have a challenge, where it fallen down flat and you're like, yeah, that didn't work. Because by creating and contributing to the community here on the Intelligent Human Leadership podcast, you're part of a greater community. And again, I don't want you to be alone. I have a whole program. We're going to actually do a 5 voices boot camp here, where those of you that are interested in going a little deep dive, it's going to be a free 90-minute dive into the 5 voices with myself, another giant guide. And I'm going to continue to find resources for you, because my point is I want to offer this up to you to help you be that intelligent human leader. And if you need a deeper dive for yourself or your organization, that you have an advocate here of David Carr of Steward Your Business. Reflect on how you're celebrating. Contact me and find out how you can get more of these accesses to the assessment, the book. I'm happy to provide these resources to you. Um, and recognize that as you become transformed and celebrate, you become that liberated leader. You live a life of liberation, freedom, renewal, becoming that best version of yourself that I truly believe we all need to be on that journey. And you're not alone. Thank you all for listening once again this week. Again, please like and subscribe. Share this with those that feel would benefit from this particular episode. Go back, check out other previous episodes. I always love hearing from each and every one of you. Until then, find one thing that you can celebrate this coming week. Look for a person and celebrate them, recognize them, and how they've affected your life in a positive way. You'll be grateful for it. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Until next time, take care.